Get started?
Yeah, ready to go.
Sure. So, hey everyone, welcome to our final Alumni Speaker Series event of the semester. My name is Walid Aman, and I'm the class president for the class of 2024. Thank you so much to Dr. Giorio for having co-lead this effort and bring this talk to fruition, and the tremendous support of Dr. Buckley, Dr. Navarro, Dr. Walbin, and Kathy as well. So just a brief introduction of the Alumni Speaker Series. So I know for a lot of us, myself included, we get mentors and role models that pave the way for us to pursue medicine. And we want to continue that now that we're M1s, M2s, and M3s, highlighting the importance of finding mentors as we chart our path forward and determine who we want to be as physicians and professionals. We aim for this to be a continual program, picking up again in the fall with different speakers, and also an opportunity for network to hear and learn from those that walk this path before us. And also hopefully provide a glimpse of the passions outside of medicine our alumni have and how medicine has allowed them to incorporate it within their field. So with that being said, it's an incredible honor to introduce Dr. Eric Edwards, co-founder and chief executive officer of FlowCorp, pioneering public benefit pharmaceutical corporation. As CEO, Dr. Edwards has assembled a world-class team committed to providing a solution to the broken essential medicine supply chain and over-reliance on foreign manufacturers for our nation's highest priority medicines. Dr. Edwards was previously co-founder of Kaleo, Inc., a pharmaceutical company in Richmond, Virginia. During 16 years at Kaleo, he had several executive management positions, including chief science officer, who was responsible for overall scientific strategy in all pharmaceutical development programs. He was also chief medical officer, responsible for developing a medical affairs team and capability while operationalizing the company's clinical program strategy. He's also vice president of innovation, overseeing the research development pipeline and overall new product strategies. Dr. Edwards is also co-inventor of multiple marketed products, including an epinephrine auto-injector for the treatment of allergic emergencies, and is named on over 215 issued and patent pending applications, and is also a published author on numerous scientific publications. Dr. Edwards did his bachelor's in biology, PhD in pharmaceutical science, and his MD, I believe all here at VCU School of Medicine. So it's wonderful to have you here, Dr. Edwards, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure being here and happy to speak with you all today.
Yeah, so you have a very unique story and journey from not just in medical school, getting your MD and PhD, but after it now with entrepreneurship. So what was that journey like? And did you always have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit when you started out, or something you sort of developed over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was a GMed. I had tried unsuccessfully to get out of Richmond, Virginia my entire life. I was like one of the very last individuals undergrad to get into this guaranteed admission program. And so I seized on the moment because I knew I wanted to be a physician. I had started at a rescue squad as a volunteer, EMT, when I was 16 years old, and became a paramedic. And I actually still provide medical direction and still support the rescue squad to this day. I've been riding on that ambulance for like 23 years. So that's kind of where, I have access to patient care still in a limited capacity. But the journey on the entrepreneurial side is a unique one. I grew up with my twin brother with life-threatening food allergies. I've been intubated before for anaphylaxis. And when you go through that experience and almost die from a tree nut, it kind of shapes the way you see the world in a little different way. We never had our EpiPens on us when we needed them the most. The EpiPen was designed not for consumers or for patients. It was actually designed for the military to administer nerve agent antidotes in the Mark I kits, as well as morphine for pain management. And that was back in the late 70s. And then they threw epinephrine in it, never went through a single human clinical trial to get approval, and then created this entire market for anaphylaxis. So my brother went to UVA and did engineering. He's an identical twin brother. And I just decided there's got to be a better way. And we started, even in college, he took courses in invention and design. I took courses in medicinal chemistry, and we started down this pathway of developing this company. If we knew what we were getting ourselves into at the time, we would have absolutely never have done it. It was crazy to just realize that you had to create a pharmaceutical company, and we ended up having to raise about $180 million to get an epinephrine autoinjector approved through the FDA, which is just, even thinking about what we went through back then, it's crazy. But we had a lot of support. I also did not go through the formal MD PhD program. So I started medical school, first year, School of Medicine. I was a class president, and then really enjoyed a lot of my experiences through that, and had a lot of leadership roles through that experience. Then I stopped medical school for a year because we had our first venture capital funding, and the School of Medicine was very kind to say, go try this for a year. And then I came back and finished second year, and then I stopped for 4.5 years, and then I went to the School of Medicine and said, hey, I want to do an MD PhD, but I don't want to do the PhD in the School of Medicine. I want to do the PhD in the School of Pharmacy. And how do you feel about that? They did not, they weren't too excited about that. Let's just say that. But times have changed as far as supporting different alternative medical students. So did the PhD in the School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Science, came back, finished my MD, headed down the pathway to be an emergency physician, and then the company pulled me in and said, you got to decide, are you going to practice medicine? Or are you going to be our chief medical officer and continue on this entrepreneurial journey? And so I chose to leave and not practice medicine, and it was a huge decision for me. But that's what ultimately led me into the pharma industry.
That's an incredible story. And I know for a lot of us are M1s, and we talk offline all about, entrepreneurship. And I came from a mortgage finance background. We have a lot of kind of diverse students as well. And so I wanted to ask you, starting off, starting a company, that's a huge leap. And like you said, if I was to look back and see what it took to do that, I'm unsure if I'd do it. But what was it about your experiences, your journey, that kind of gave you that courage to, take that chance and also step away from med school? Like you said, this is something you wanted to do. You're in the GMed program and you walked away for a bit. What was that process like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that I've now kind of looked back and have seen that this stage and this season of life that most medical students are in is one where you can afford to take greater risk. You can try new things. You can look at alternatives. And I don't know where the curriculum has gone at VCU since I left, but I can tell you firsthand that we really did not receive much of an education on alternative pathways to medicine. At least when I was going through the process, you're put into almost a funnel with these expectations, right? So make it through your M1 year, make it through your M2 year, make it through your step 1. Then we move into clinic, and then you got to make it through that, get through step 2. And then we're going to start preparing for the next phase of your journey and interviewing and AIs and internship and then residency. And throughout that entire pathway, there wasn't a lot of folks who would stop and say, hey, do you also know that there's an entire different world out there that medical doctors and others can explore that have nothing to do with the practice of medicine or limited practice of medicine? That was never introduced as a concept. So we kind of had to find our way. And what helped me become an entrepreneur and take a step and a leap, I would say, is I had really good people around me as advisors. And when you're young and you don't know about a topic, what do? You go seek advice, you find wise people. And I had great mentors who would introduce me to individuals. For example, I got introduced to an individual by the name of R.J. Kirk very early on, who was a successful entrepreneur who built a company called New River Pharmaceuticals, sold it for about $2.3 billion, created a drug called Vyvanse for ADHD, and then has done an amazing amount of work and building companies and selling them, and just listening to others who've been there before you and understanding here's the next step you need to take. We had a lot of that. Early on, I remember my brother and I going to venture capital firms and saying, we're not asking for money, but we are asking for advice. If we want to build this medical device or drug, what do you want to see from us? What do you want to see from us to garner potential a capital raise? And they gave us a checkbox. Here's what we want to see. And at that time, the company looked more like a law firm. It was Edwards, 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 and Edwards. My brother was the a business guy. My other brother was the marketing guy. My third brother was the helping us in business development and strategy. And then and then Evan and I were involved. So there were 4 brothers, and then my mom was the corporate secretary, and my dad was the CEO. And the venture capital firm was like, "What are you doing? This is a real company. Half of you all should not even be a part of this company. So let's get real." So that, I think, just listening to people and understanding what you need to do to get to that next step is huge. And our first $600,000 that we raised was raised 90% from physicians, allergists, and friends and family. And so find people who believe in you and will take a chance, but you have to have a clear plan for what that next step is on your entrepreneurial journey.
That's incredible. Just kind of seeing like your journey into that, and the family support you had, and also the initiative you took to reach out to venture capital firms and seeking advice. And one of the big things that we want to do is, when we're trying to find mentors, whether that's within the practice of clinical medicine, whether that's outside of medicine, like you said, finding alternative routes, we're finding it's tough to know what you don't know at this point, finding, who to reach out to. So how did you find great mentors and advocates that kind of guided you during your initial journey? Whether that was first in medicine, and especially in entrepreneurship, now that you're so heavily invested into that.
Yes, and even through this new company, we had to do the same thing: find the right experts to not only potentially join our team, but also to be our own scientific advisors. And so the best advice I could give you is, if there's an area of interest that you're passionate about, and you have an idea, or you want to explore a field, and you want to explore that field with a greater understanding of what it looks like, the first place that I start is I actually go to the literature. I pull up the scientific literature and figure out who actually is the leading voice on that topic. Usually you're going to find an expert who's had multiple publications around a topic. You see they're passionate about it, and then you just reach out to them on LinkedIn or call them up and say, "Hey, I need 10 minutes of your time over coffee. I'm really interested in your work. I'd really like to talk to you more about it." And then allow that to lead into that next conversation of, can we meet? Or I'll fly out to you. I'd love to just sit down and talk to you and pick your brain. I'd love to understand what this looks like. I did that with the leading voice on epinephrine and anaphylaxis, Dr. Estelle Simons out of Canada. I called her when I was a first-year med student. I was like, "I will go anywhere in the world where you are if I can just meet you for 30 minutes and talk to you about what we want to build." And she ended up becoming the chairman of our scientific advisory board. And so it's just having the courage, understanding you don't lose much if they say no, but you may lose a lot by not trying. So it doesn't matter if it's about being an entrepreneur, or if you just are interested in a field that is an alternative field of medicine. A lot of these world experts are just people too, and they love to help and find inquisitive minds who just want to know more about the topic that they're passionate about.
And that's incredible advice. And I know for a lot of our, we'll give a chance for people to ask questions. I have questions coming in to me asking more about, hey, ask him this, ask him that. But I wanted to sort of start off, when you're starting a company or even starting med school, you're going to deal with a lot of failure going on. Just initially starting off, that might discourage you from moving forward. Like you said, you have to kind of push through and keep it going. I wanted to ask you, what were some of the early struggles you had going on, and how did you get to the point where you built that cushion of confidence to push through, and then not just start one company after 6, but then 16 years later start another company and continue down this path of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, a lot. If you don't have failures, you can't succeed. So I mean, I'll just start by saying, the journey is the destination. You never ever feel like you're actually there, and you're going to have failures along the way. It's absolutely inevitable. And you just have to have the perspective that if you're going to fail, fail fast and fail forward. Don't look back. Don't repeat the same mistake, and learn from those mistakes. I have many many examples that I can point to, specific to even what I went through in medical school. I remember we had an endocrinology exam, and I was trying to manage going to pitch to a Silicon Valley VC without telling my teachers that I was getting on a flight to go pitch to the Silicon Valley VC, and I was going to be able to make it back in time. I had this all planned out. I was going to study on the plane, make it back in time. I'll be able to do both, right? I can pitch, I can be an entrepreneur, and then I can go ahead and execute, and I will push through this endocrine exam. And I think I was able to study for like, I don't know, 25 minutes or so on the plane. I felt nauseous, and I got back the very next morning at 8 a.m. We had this computer exam in the computer place where we did the exam. I think I got a 72 or something miserable on the exam, something where as a medical student, you see your score come up and you just feel like you've failed miserably. I had never had a score that low on an exam before. And I'll tell you that it was a kick in my face to say, whoa, what are you doing? Prioritize your priorities. Figure out what you're doing. It's okay to ask for help. And I walked into the office the School of Medicine, said, I need help. I'm pursuing two different passions at the same time, and I need a relief valve. Do you think that I can take a break? Do you think that I could stop for a while? And that's what began the discussion of me trying to work on the company while also working at school. And thankfully, I was able to convince the admissions committee to let me have a break. It was very atypical. And I know Dr. Buckley and others embrace, medical students and the individuality of what's going on in your own lives. And for that, I was very, very fortunate to have people who said, Eric, give this a shot. And then when they'd see that I'd actually raised money or something, an event in the company was happening, they felt more confident that they needed to give me that shot. So lots of different failures. I will tell you a funny failure. I got to tell you the story. It's my favorite first year medical story ever. So as a reminder, I was the president of the class. We had a tropical storm Gaston coming through. At that time, all of the M1 students parked at the same place down the hill off of Broad Street. It was a parking lot at the bottom of the hill. Then they walked up the hill. And we had torrential rain going on. And we were going through that initial, I don't know what, we probably are in biochemistry or some 4-hour block of courses back to back in the Egyptian building. And I had the dean at the time come tap me on the shoulder and say, you need to come with me. And so I got an umbrella and I walked with him outside, and we walked to the top of the hill, and we looked down, and the bottom of the hill was literally a river. And all of the vehicles for all of our class were floating away. And he said, let's talk about what our strategy is going to be to announce this to the M1 class. And I said, I don't know. What do you go tell the class? That good news and bad news. The good news, everybody is here and safe. The bad news is you will not have transportation for the next couple of months. So I went up and went onto the class, and we interrupted, and I said, I don't want anybody to panic. We don't want anyone to run outside. There's a significant weather event, but we just need you to know that we're going to be canceling the rest of the classes today. We're going to be talking about what to do, but anyone who parked at the bottom of the hill, which is 90% of you, your car is gone. It is literally gone. And they thought I was joking. They just started laughing like this was a joke until they realized that I wasn't. So that was also a failure in planning, and it's okay. It ended up being okay. Lots of insurance claims filed that day.
That's wonderful perspective for me as class president in case something happens. I might have to reach out to you to how to handle something like that. So we talked a little bit about the failures. What about the successes? You talked about, you mentioned getting FDA approving and funding. What was one or two successes that told you like, hey, I love medicine, but this is it, entrepreneurship. I'm going all in on this.
Yeah. It's really interesting. You start having these pivotal moments, and I'm a faith-based guy, and sometimes I'll call them God winks, but sometimes things happen, and you're like, "Wow, that's providential." And sometimes things happen in a way that you wouldn't expect them, and they provide confirmation that you're actually onto something. So an example of that is in 2006, we had a meeting with our executive team, and we were informed that we thought we were celebrating a milestone. We had a patent that was issued. We were about to land a strategic partnership. So we thought this was a whole meeting for our CEO to announce this milestone. And instead, he handed out champagne, handed out glasses. We filled them with champagne, and he said, "I have big news. I have big news. Congratulations, everyone. We are now important. We've just been sued by Pfizer." And so he used this otherwise traumatic event of being sued by the largest pharma company in the world to explain that we now mattered. We were onto something. We had an epinephrine autoinjector that competed against their autoinjector, and they were really nervous about how far we had come. And I think that's a great example of sometimes things don't happen the way that you think, but they give you an indication that something's heading in the right direction. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. You might get to go through lawsuits. We ended up winning that lawsuit, obviously. But that was one example when we knew we were onto something big. And then 3 weeks later, we signed a $230 million license agreement with Sanofi to really launch the company and get things going. And things just kind of took off from there. We had some other challenges along the way. And then a lot of challenges with pricing and reimbursement and getting our product to patients. But you learn and you push forward. In medical school, just as you all probably tell yourselves often, short-term pain, long-term gain, short-term pain, long-term gain. We're going to get through this syllabus. We're going to get through this class. We're going to get to the next one. It's not that different when you're going down a project development pathway and trying to get a drug to the market, or trying to go down an entrepreneurial journey and figure out what is that next milestone to get this and push this company forward. You take one step at a time, and you just keep going, and you don't give up.
Wow, that's incredible to hear. You're going from being sued to Pfizer to then getting, $200 million in funding and kind of launching your guys' entrepreneurial journey. You sort of hinted at this earlier about how you start off with your brother, your family, your dad was a CEO. Now that you kind of advanced in your business entrepreneurship, how do you integrate your home life with the challenges of your business and handling your many responsibilities as the head of the company?
Wow, what a great question. I have to be honest and tell you all, at Kaleo and through my first entrepreneurial experience for the first company, I didn't do that well. In fact, I would say I failed miserably. I made work an idol. I missed too many things that were that I would now look back and consider moments that I could have shared with my children, but instead I was traveling or I was not present. And I will emphatically tell you all that even with the physicians that I am close friends with, and I remain close friends with my classmates and others that are practicing medicine, there are a lot of mistakes that are made by living a lie that work should be part of your life. And I really strongly consider everyone to realize that work is not your life. Wealth is not defined by financial success. Wealth is defined by the relationships that you have. Wealth is defined by the time that you share with your friends, the experiences you have with your family. That's called having margin in your life. And for the first decade of my career, I didn't have any margin in my life. Now I've been much more intentional with Flow. We're a public benefit company. I have my kids involved in almost every aspect of understanding what we're doing. They helped me design the logo that you see in the background. They were involved. I have date nights with them on a regular basis. And most importantly, if I had the choice of having to take a meeting at 6 or 7 o'clock or be present at my son's baseball game or my daughter's basketball game, my son's baseball game or daughter's basketball game, they're going to take priority no matter what. And so having perspective and understanding what's really important, and making sure that there is more to life than driving forward this, I would say, worldly view of what success is critical. And I encourage anyone who ever struggles with that to please reach out to me, and I'll tell you some more stories around why you should be focusing on significance, not success, and having significance in the lives of others, the lives of your patients, but most importantly, the lives of your own family and relationships.
Thank you so much for sharing. And that's kind of, it ties in. I watched your TED Talk earlier today, and I'll post that link to everybody to see as well. So, I think even for a lot of us, we also think about, we're dealing so much of time, school, family, how do you balance that? And it's always great perspective to hear from people ahead of us that, hey, I succeeded in this, but I really failed in this aspect of it, and finding the balance, and kind of integrating everything together. And so I always wanted to ask, like, entrepreneurs and CEOs, what is your typical week like? So how do you kind of manage your day to day? What are your responsibilities? Is it meetings? Is it how much you're involved with product development, the engineering side, raising money? So, well, what is it let's say your typical day like, and also broadly your typical week like?
Sure. Yeah. So Flow is kind of a high growth company. It's a unique startup. It's not your typical startup because we were we had a major contract from the federal government that provided rocket fuel. So typically, a company will take 3 or 4 years to get to 40 or 50 people, and it's a slow growth, one small bolus of capital at a time. That has not been our experience. It's been an interesting experience. We in the first year of us operating, landed a multi-$100-million contract, and have close to 50 employees, and it's been very busy. So what does my day look like, and how do we manage that? I get up at the same time every day, 6:30 in the morning. 3 days a week, I put protected time to work out, to just slow down and try to put away my phone and electronics. And then I have time that is protected time for getting prepared for the day. I hold certain meetings and one-on-ones with my executive team on Mondays. And then I have 2 hours on Wednesday and 2 hours for Thursday for executive committee and strategic partnerships. In between those meetings, we have other meetings that primarily divide my time into about 25% strategy and innovation, 25% capital raising, and you have to have investor relations. You're always raising capital as a CEO. Even when you don't need capital, you're always raising capital. You have to always be talking to the banking industry and know what's out there. And so that's a big part of being a CEO. And then outside of strategy and innovation and raising capital, there's a lot that's involved in thought leadership. So right before this call, I spent an hour with the United States government, who's been on site for 3 days auditing us. And then an hour before that, I was on the phone with 33 congressional legislative aides on a China supply chain study panel, talking about how the impact of what's going on in India and China with COVID today will have severe consequences and implications on our essential medicine drug supply chain 6 months from now. So lots of things around being that thought leader. And then I'll finally say the remainder of my time is all about looking out for the welfare and the culture of the company, vision casting, making sure everyone's taken care of.
It sounds like you're incredibly busy, and you have to show leadership in different aspects, and each one may require a different leadership style. I wanted to ask you, how did you develop your leadership style? How much did medicine play into it? How much was it innate? how much was it experiences where you put yourself out there, you try to do something one way and then you fail, or you succeed and it kind of builds you kind of the confidence to be like, okay, this is the path forward?
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting. I think medicine has played a major role in interpersonal relations, being able to talk to anyone from any culture. If you think about what we have to do, we have to establish a rapport with people who have varying backgrounds, and sometimes we're in the middle of dealing with difficult conversations, right? Challenging circumstances. Medicine prepares you very well to handle business, more than you would expect. There isn't a lot in the business arena, I'd say, like people getting an MBA or going through business school, of interpersonal interactions, dealing with a lot of folks, having to have conversations that I would say are protected and personal, confidential conversations. But if you think about medicine, we're trained to do all of that. And we're even trained to handle some pretty urgent, emergent situations. That's number one, handling interpersonal relations and knowing how to talk across different cultural boundaries, experiences. The second thing is, I think that doctors and medical students learn very quickly how to prioritize your priorities, how to triage and figure out what's urgent and what's important. And that skill is absolutely critical for a CEO or any entrepreneur that gets thrown all these different things. You have to sort out, okay, that's important, but I can do that next year, or I can do that a month from now. What's urgent today? Where do I need to prioritize my time today? How do I want to be careful with the use of proceeds or the capital that I've been given, which is an oxygen tank that's been turned on and it's just bleeding. And you just want to make sure that you're very careful in how you spend your capital and money. How do you do those things? Medicine, medical school, all of that knowledge is critical. Finally, when you're talking about healthcare and you're talking about being able to liaise with some of the scientific thought leaders throughout the world, I have found that being a doctor, just even walking in with an MD and being able to talk to individuals at the NIH or other doctors in HHS or hospital chief pharmacy officers and others, just as a professional to professional, where they're not looking at me as the CEO MBA, but I tell them my background and they're like, oh, so you get it. So you understand what's going on with these drugs and you understand that the impact on patients. We can talk the talk. And medical school prepared me to be able to talk the talk.
That's great perspective to see how, even though you've gone into entrepreneurship full time, medicine still plays a huge role in your day-to-day interactions, and it kind of helped train you for business. It's also encouraging to know, I didn't have to go to Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, to develop like a business sense. Like medicine is can play a continual role in developing those skills. I wanted to open it up to other people. I know we have a lot of interest for questions, if that's okay. So does anyone have any questions I'd like to ask Dr. Edwards?
Hey, Dr. Edwards, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. So a question I had was that once we come up with the idea, how did you build your team? How did you find people who were ready to go all in like you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first place we looked was within the inner Richmond community and the cultures around us. So Evan, for example, would go to his faculty advisor in the School of Engineering at UVA and say, hey, where can I get some help on product design? And how do I do this? And do you know anybody who knows anything about patenting or intellectual property? I, in like manner, started talking to the Department of Medicinal Chemistry and started talking to the Institute of Structural Biology and some of the people who knew about pharmaceuticals and how do you build a drug. And you just start, I think it's really advantageous to just start in the academic arena, and then you start to realize some of the people in the academic arena actually have backgrounds in the business arena as well, or they know people because they've collaborated with them, and then they introduce, and you start building out your network. So to answer your question, you have to start somewhere with relationships, and it's the easiest place to start is right underneath your nose. In the case of being at VCU, lots of resources at VCU for any kind of healthcare related product or technology. Okay, so healthcare IT and services, medical devices, diagnostics, pharmaceutics, biotechnologically derived therapy. There's actually experts right underneath our nose here that know the industry, know the space. So start there, and then that starts to, then you end the conversation with this question: who else should I be talking to about this? Who else do you advise that I speak to in order to understand? And then when you start hearing the same themes and the same advice, it really starts to focus you. All right, well, that point right there, I've heard it now from 3 different people. I need to focus on that. And so that's where I would recommend you start.
Thank you so much.
So I remember in medical school, you're given these you're given these options like, hey, we're gonna have this guest speaker here, and I can only imagine some of you all are hanging out in your den or studying or whatever, but there's a lot of medical students who are like, I don't need to go hear this guy, Eric. You got to tell them they missed out. We had a great conversation. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've personally learned a lot. So if no other questions right now, I was going to jump in with one.
Sure.
It's a question I kind of ask all of our previous speakers about, and it kind of relates to medicine as well as to business. I always ask them, different parts of your career, and I hear from a lot of my colleagues right now that where they feel like insecurities or imposter syndrome as they kind of progress and are achieving things or getting success or failure along the way. Did you ever have that while you're going through your journey, whether that was in medical school or whether that was, when you first started your company, started seeing so much success, or we decided to start a new company and do it all over again? Were there any points where you kind of felt that imposter syndrome, or was that a point where you felt like, you know what, I know what I'm doing at this point, and kind of push forward?
Oh, listen, I think every single day when you're doing something that's bigger than yourself, you are always asking the question, am I the right person for this? Should I be in charge of this? I think that's very natural. You're gonna face that in medicine. You're gonna face that. I still face that when I'm riding on an ambulance and I get a 911 call and I'll show up to some massive, multi-system trauma, and I'm asked, am I equipped to handle this? So you're put in that position, and you just have to realize that when you become an expert in something and you've done the work to really prepare yourself, there's no one better than you at that than you at that particular time. And I tell my board of directors all the time, this company is not Eric Edwards. This company is not about a person. This company is not about my singular vision. This company is much, much bigger than me just because I'm the co-founder, or Frank Upton, the other co-founder. This company is bigger than any of us. So when you're ready and you think we need a new CEO, let me know and I will step aside. And I think you have to live life with this intersection of not letting pride in the way. So instead of pride, be confident, but at the same time, not letting fear grab hold of you. So it's this intersection of confidence and humility versus pride and fear. Don't be down in this quadrant of pride and fear. Stay in that quadrant of humility and confidence, and then you're in a safe place.
And sort of building off that about your own company, I want to get your thoughts on what do you think the future is of the work you're doing, of your company, and also about your career, what you kind of, let's say, what do you see yourself doing in leading the next couple of years, or even let's say the next year?
Yeah, so we're super excited to be building this massive infrastructure in Virginia. We have world-class laboratories being built right at the Biotechnology Research Park down the street. Our headquarters is down here in Richmond on the James River, and then we have massive manufacturing facilities being built in Petersburg, Virginia. And all of this infrastructure is dedicated to one thing, building the future of advanced manufacturing end-to-end for small molecules. So not large biotechnologically derived drugs like monoclonal antibodies, not vaccines, not gene therapy, but small molecule therapeutics, which encompasses about 80% of the therapeutics that are out there, and trying to move them away from an antiquated batch manufacturing process that is decades old, produces a lot of waste, and has been really lost to foreign sources for years. We're first starting with key essential medicines necessary to sustain life. We're talking about key antibiotics, medicines for pain, sedation agents. If we wouldn't have done what we did back in March of last year, we wouldn't have had an issue with getting patients on ventilators. We would have had individual issues with actually having the medication to intubate a patient to get them on a ventilator. We were days away from running out of neuromuscular blockers in this country, days. And our job was to keep the drugs out of the headlines. And that's what we were doing. We quickly got 2.2 million doses of essential medicines into the strategic national stockpile. We were the first ones in the country to do this. And we're now reimagining this supply chain to bring essential medicine manufacturing back to the United States, focusing on key medical countermeasures and critical drugs that have been in shortage. I'm most proud of our recently announced Children's Hospital Coalition, where we've partnered with the leading children's hospitals in this country to solve for pediatric drug shortages. In 2018, there was a vincristine shortage, and pediatric oncologists were having to choose which child survived and which child died by not having vincristine available widely. It was unbelievable because there was no profit to be made in this drug, and Pfizer and Teva decided to stop manufacturing them. What we're doing is we're trying to resecure and bring stability to these drugs and change the way they're viewed by our country so that they're not viewed as commodities, they're viewed as strategic assets, as a matter of national public health security. And we're making inroads. So what I see in the future is Flow being a leader in essential medicine manufacturing right here in Virginia, where we are manufacturing over 100 of the most critical essential medicines, and we are celebrating each and every time we cross a drug off of that drug shortage list, so that family members living in the United States don't have to be afraid that when they call 911, they're not going to have access to a critical medicine to treat a cardiac arrest or some other critical illness. That's what exists today in America. You can call 911 and not be guaranteed to even have simple critical care medicines on the ambulance due to drug shortages. That's what we're hoping to solve for.
Wow, that sounds, I mean, especially with us starting our journey in medicine, something you never kind of think about or kind of get exposure to, like the other aspect of supply chain. And, you know, you think about practicing medicine, but the ecosystem that kind of goes around it to make it work is a huge part of it. And Dr. Buckley always talks to us about how this last year with COVID, you know, we call it like leadership. There's a great book by Doris Kearns Goodwin called Leadership in Turbulent Times, of how new things come up and you have to kind of shift and make decisions about unexpected things. And a lot of businesses had to do that in the last years. A lot of schools did. I know we did as an institution, switching to online Zoom that kind of changed the scope of education for us last year. What were the challenges that you all had with COVID last year, and that kind of, you touched on a little bit with the supply chain stuff, that kind of had you shift your focus of your business or address problems that you probably weren't aware of that existed prior?
Yeah, so when we started the company, we were starting on building a children's hospital consortium to make pediatric drugs in shortage. When COVID hit, we looked at the drugs that the pediatric hospitals wanted us to make, and there was a 65% overlap with the key essential medicines that you were going to need for COVID-19 hospitalized patients. So we had this information that, oh my goodness, these essential medicines were already in shortage before COVID. They're made using supply chains from India and China primarily. If they shut down the supply chains, we're going to be in trouble. And we decided to pivot and go to the United States government and say, are you all focusing on these key essential medicines? Or are you just focusing on PPE, ventilators, vaccines? Do you know about these key generic drugs some of these vials of medicines are cheaper than a bottle of Fiji water out of the airport? Do you understand the importance of making sure these drugs are available? And no one was doing anything about it. So we were put in charge initially of getting contract manufacturing started in the United States. And we were doing it through a virtual team of contract manufacturers throughout the country, trying to suck up capacity. And then in March of 2020, India shut down the export of 26 essential active pharmaceutical ingredients. And the government just exploded. They were like, oh my goodness, you were right. We're in trouble. We need to rebuild this here. And that's where things, they really started taking us seriously. And then ever since then, we've been kind of this hybrid approach. 99% of our company's been vaccinated. We were kind of at one of those essential workers that we were very blessed and fortunate to be at the top of the list because we were building manufacturing infrastructure and we had to get these medicines made. So now we have Monday and Fridays are virtual, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are in the office. And we're all working very, very hard. But for us, it was trying to get manufacturing facilities to work quickly. And we had workers that were at risk that we had to protect, but they had to make these medicines. And so that was happening in the middle of COVID, but we got it done. So, and today we now are dealing with the unfortunate challenges in India. Some of their production facilities are at 10% capacity right now. And these are some of the active ingredients. And I'm talking about simple active ingredients, you all, ibuprofen, aspirin, acetaminophen, that are only made there. They're not made in the United States. And that's gonna have an impact. It's gonna have an impact for months, if not years to come. And now we're trying to figure out how to get ahead of potential drug shortages that are going to be exacerbated further by the fact that other countries are still dealing with massive COVID-19 challenges.
I want to give everyone else one more chance to ask any questions before giving you an opportunity to give any closing remarks, Dr. Edwards.
Ask any question y'all want, even if it has nothing to do with business. You said most of these are M1s, so like we're like done. Aren't you like done?
We have one more exam next Friday, and so we're done after that. And we just took our endocrine exam, so we related a lot to your story that you told earlier.
What exam, what is the last exam for M1s this year?
Reproductive.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sorry. I don't remember anything about reproductive. I have nothing wise I can tell you about reproduction other than I'm dealing with a highly hormonal 13-year-old and 15-year-old. You know, who think that I should know more about what they're going through.
If I could jump in and ask, what are the implications of reframing something as a commodity versus a strategic asset?
Yeah, huge implications. We're trying to convince the United States government that there was legislation you all may or may not know about called the Hatch-Waxman Act. That congressional legislation changed the entire industry. Back in decades ago, it was about 83% of the medicines that we consumed in America were branded drugs, patented, branded, expensive drugs. And the FDA and Congress was frustrated that more companies weren't making generics. They didn't want to make generics. There was no incentives in place to make generics. They wanted to make branded, innovative drugs. So in the Hatch-Waxman Act, they ended up saying, we've got to do something strategic and we've got to incentivize generic manufacturers to make generics. So they gave 6 months of exclusivity, meaning no one else can compete with you if you're the first person to make a generic of a drug once it goes off patent. And now today, 90% of patients consume generics in America. It absolutely exploded the generics industry. Everyone was racing to get into it. So what we're trying to do is say, listen, if you look at this as a strategic asset for this country and as a matter of national public health security, and if you look at it as we need to have this here in the United States domestically made, not all medicines, just the key essential medicines, and you incentivize companies with exclusivity, 6 months of exclusivity if you make your drug in the United States, end to end, 100%, you will have no competition for a period of time. Watch what happens. So many people will flood and come back to America. So that's one element of a strategic asset. The other is we have medicines that are made as countermeasures or antidotes to the how do I explain this? The same country who may produce anthrax also makes the medicine to counteract anthrax. That's a huge issue as a matter of national public health security. We should not have an overdependence. For example, 97% of our penicillin is made in China, 97%. We have lost our penicillin manufacturing capability and fermentation capacity in the United States. All of our key antibiotics should not be made outside of the United States. In case of a trade dispute or a natural disaster or another Suez Canal debacle or a future pandemic threat that cuts off the borders for some of these supply chains, we need a certain supply of medicines here at home. And that's what I mean by a strategic asset versus just a commodity.
That explains a lot. Thank you.
No problem, Aaron. Good luck on your exam.
Hey, Dr. Edwards, thanks so much for your time. I was wondering if you could recommend a couple books, either for those of us interested in medicine and entrepreneurship, and also preventing like crisis management, like you were talking about earlier.
Oh, great. That's a great question. The answer is yes. And one of the book's titles is escaping me. There's a doctor friend of mine who actually has a blog and a website. And I think it's like Doctorpreneurship, and she's an entrepreneur and has written a book about this. I will get that to you all and list it. But there's a couple of great big business books that are worth reading for anyone. One, yeah, Doctorpreneurs. You should check that out. Doctorpreneurs.com. That's a great site for anyone just kind of looking into, how do I build my own business? And then I'll get a couple books that relate to that. But then a couple books, Jim Collins' Good to Great is an excellent book. And then there's a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. That book has informed my strategy around so many different things. And the premise of that is go into areas that no one else is going into. So in the case of medicine, consider becoming an expert in an area, a specialized area of medicine that no one else has specialized in yet. And quickly you become the world's thought leader on that topic. And for Blue Ocean Strategy, it's go into areas where there's less competition, stay out of the red, bloody waters, head towards blue oceans and how you think about what you want to build and where you want to be. And you carve out a space for you that others cannot enter. An example of that is when we developed AviQ, our epinephrine autoinjector, we decided to be the first in the world to create an infant dose. It's for infants. The only one that is a 0.1 milligram dose in the world. And now we have complete ownership over that space. No one else can have an autoinjector for an infant. And once they get on AviQ at that young age, they often stay on AviQ. They don't want to go to a big bulky pen. We've had many cases where someone tried to prescribe it in an EpiPen and they're like, no, I want the credit card size one that talks to you. That's the one I'm used to. So that was a Blue Ocean strategic play that we made. And we do a lot of that here at the company. And it will serve you well as you try to differentiate yourself, both in applying for residency, but also as a physician.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. Any other questions? Thank you all. And listen, trust me, I've been in your shoes. I know you have a lot of different opportunities to spend time. You can be hanging out in the beauty of full sun. Maybe some of you all are while you're listening to this, or you could be studying right now or just doing nothing. Thanks for taking the time to come and talk to a former alum. Congrats for being where you are and almost being done this year. Very challenging environment you all have been through. And here's to a bright and hopeful future for each and every one of you all. Don't be a stranger. I'm like right down the road, right down the street, and have the utmost respect for the faculty, Dr. Buckley and so many people who have been supportive of us for years. Y'all are in great hands and the future is bright. Anytime you want to talk about what do MDs do outside of practice medicine, I'm happy to talk to you. And then just mention that you were on this so that when your buddies reach out and your colleagues and classmates, try to reach out to have a one-on-one, I'll say, well, were you listening? Were you on? Or did you skip out? Because I'm going to prioritize those that, spent an hour with me.
Well, Dr. Edwards, I would definitely follow up with you. You've given like amazing advice. And thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us, give us your time, share your feedback. It's been incredibly helpful to me, especially early on in my journey. So thank you so much for being so generous with your time and advice.
Yeah, pleasure. Good luck to all of you all, and enjoy the time off before you hit the next year.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for joining us as well today. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Thank you, Dr. Buckley.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks to both of you.
Bye now. Thanks.